My name is Vivian Reed, and for most of my adult life, my family made a habit of pretending I didn't exist. Unless, of course, they needed someone to ridicule at dinner. It was my mother's 70th birthday. A grand banquet, hosted in the Governor's Hall at the Boston Heritage Club. Crystal chandeliers, wine that cost more than my first car, and a guest list that read like the state's political directory. I hadn't planned to attend. I hadn't been invited, not really. But my name still made the seating chart, right at the end of the table, beside the coat check, across from the emergency exit. Symbolic in its way. I wore a navy blue dress, no label, just structure and silence. Everyone else shimmered. Silk, sequins, posture rehearsed like performance art. I sat quietly, chewing ice from my untouched glass of water, while my sister Lauren, in her ivory sheath dress and diamond smile, toasted family who stayed relevant. My mother raised her wine glass and, with that politician's poise she'd perfected over 4 decades in office, turned to me and said, "Tell us, Vivian, do you still get to go inside the building, or do you just stand near it, hoping someone recognizes you?" Polite laughter, too sharp to be casual. My brother Charles muttered something about perpetual sabbaticals and lifted his glass to his own joke. I didn't respond. I never did. Not when I was 15 and called the sensitive one. Not when I left Yale and was labeled the waste. Not when my mother quietly erased me from campaign photos and Christmas cards. They didn't want to talk to me. They wanted to perform their superiority. They didn't just want to win the argument. They wanted to write me out of the family entirely. I sat still, my fork untouched, my breathing even. I was almost proud of how calm I remained, until I heard my sister's voice again. Maybe she's just back to pitch another nonprofit rescue. You know how she loves the tragic. I stood then, not dramatically, just enough to make space between me and their script. I reached for my coat, and that's when she walked in. Anna, my assistant, tailored black suit, badge visible, no hesitation. She scanned the room once, then approached with perfect clarity. "Ma'am Secretary," she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "we need to review the revised reentry housing policy before your 9 a.m. with the Vice President." There was a second of stunned silence. Then my mother's glass twitched. My sister's mouth fell half open, and I looked around the room that had spent decades reducing me. Then I smiled for the first time that night. Not wide, not gloating, just enough to say, "I'm still here. And now you see me." That moment didn't end the war, but it sure as hell ended their illusion of who I was. And that, my God, was enough to begin. It's strange what your brain holds onto when everything is falling apart. For me, it wasn't the psychiatric ward's white walls or the restraints. It wasn't even my mother's signature on the admission form. It was the way the nurse tapped her pen against the clipboard, softly, rhythmically, like she was scoring a lullaby for a scene no one should ever witness. That's the day my name stopped belonging to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that, before I was Secretary Vivian Reed, or even that activist daughter, I was just a graduate student, a behavioral psychology doctoral candidate at Yale, 3rd year in, running simulations on trauma adaptation models. I was sharp, obsessively focused, headed for a policy think tank. That was the plan. Everyone approved of that version of me, until I volunteered to join a field research rotation in southern Arizona, processing data on detention conditions for migrant children. Just 8 weeks, supervised, funded, safe. But nothing prepared me for Alma. She was 11, Guatemalan, silent. They'd tagged her as disruptive, though she never raised her voice. Just existed wrong. A male staffer shoved her duffel bag into a wall one day. I still remember the sound of the zipper catching, her tiny flinch, and the way she folded in on herself like a bird who already knew no one was coming. That night, I vomited into a plastic-lined dorm toilet. Not from food, from clarity. The next morning, I walked away. I emailed Yale. I withdrew from the program. No fanfare, no tears, just a decision. At home in Boston, it wasn't even a fight. It was a verdict. Lauren called me an embarrassment. Charles laughed. "You burned Yale for a kid you can't even talk to?" My mother sat at the dining table, fingers laced, expression unreadable. "You are violating the architecture we built for you," she said. "This is not rebellion. This is pathology." 1 week later, she suggested a wellness evaluation to calm the political whispers. I was exhausted. I agreed. What followed wasn't evaluation. It was containment. 28 days under involuntary hold at a private psychiatric center on the North Shore. Diagnosis: oppositional defiant disorder with delusional altruistic fixation. They dressed it up in clinical language, but I understood what they meant. She refuses to comply. She believes the broken deserve help. I was 26 years old, and my own mother had locked me away for being inconvenient. My father, Dr. Franklin Reed, surgeon emeritus, pillar of the Reed Medical Network, visited once. He stood behind the glass and said, "Viv, I think you mean well, but your mother's under enormous pressure." Then he left. He never came back. When I was discharged, I went home only long enough to pack 1 bag, a canvas tote with fraying straps and a quote stitched in faded thread. "We grow past the roots that tried to strangle us." Then I bought a bus ticket to Washington, D.C. I had $347 in a checking account and no references, so I invented one, Evie Harper, my grandmother's name. She'd raised 6 children in a mining town and never once needed a resume. Under that name, I applied for a clerical position at a small nonprofit, Advocate, working with displaced workers and food-insecure families. They didn't care about Yale. They didn't ask why I had a gap in my timeline. They hired me to file paperwork, and so I filed. Then I wrote policy drafts, grant proposals, budget analysis. I'd stay late, editing briefs others didn't want to touch, and slowly I began to climb, not upward into power, but inward into purpose. I didn't post photos. I didn't go home for holidays. I didn't even tell anyone my real last name. For a long time, I lived like a ghost, but a ghost who was building something real. No one applauded, no one noticed. But after everything my family had taught me, anonymity felt a lot like freedom. It's amazing how much you can build when no one's watching you. For nearly 3 years, I operated in the background at Advocate and then at GroundPath, a small policy-focused think tank tucked inside an old office building 2 blocks off DuPont Circle. No sign on the door, just a buzzer and a coffee machine that wheezed like it had been personally offended by the concept of caffeine. My title was Policy Associate, which really meant I drafted things no one read until something went wrong. Zoning conflicts, emergency shelter compliance, post-disaster family unification. Nothing glamorous, nothing viral, but I made it matter. And then came the blueprint. I wasn't aiming for history. I just wanted to fix a hole, one of the many left in the wake of the pandemic. It started as a 10-page white paper on urban food deserts and became a 128-page federal blueprint for post-crisis reintegration. Housing programs, mental health triage, job re-entry pipelines for veterans, caregivers, immigrants. I submitted it under my alias, Evie Harper, to a collaborative brief between 5 minor agencies. It was passed around, adapted, cited in a congressional hearing. NPR did a segment on it. The White House included it in a press briefing. They called it the Harper Model. I kept my head down. Until one morning, Martin, our director, slid into my cubicle during break and handed me a thick, creased folder. "They want to meet you," he said. I looked at him confused. "Who?" He didn't blink. "The vice president's policy team. Someone in their office traced the Harper submission back to you. They're reviewing you for a potential federal appointment." I didn't answer. My palms went cold. Not from fear, from the memory of every dinner I'd sat through as a girl while my mother listed everyone's accomplishments like prayer beads and skipped mine. I stayed up late that night drafting a message to her. Not to gloat, not to reconnect, just to tell her. But as I typed, my chest tightened. I could already hear her voice, disbelieving, calculating. I deleted the draft. Instead, I wrote 1 sentence and hit send. "I will attend the Reed Medical 75th Gala. Make room. I'm not coming alone." I didn't explain. But I knew what I'd be bringing with me. The quiet years, the policies that worked, The names of every mother who could finally afford insulin, and every girl who didn't drop out of school because a meal program kept her going. And one crayon drawing. It had arrived in a plain envelope months earlier, no return address. Just a child's scribble. 2 stick figures holding hands beside a lopsided house. A sun with eyelashes beamed from the corner. In big block letters, "You helped Mom. Thank you for not giving up on her." No signature, just that. I kept it in my wallet, right next to my old Yale ID. One reminded me who they wanted me to be. The other reminded me why I walked away. A week before the gala, I received the official letter. I'd been appointed as Secretary of Social Restoration, a newly formed cabinet-level position focused on rebuilding post-crisis infrastructure across housing, health, and civil recovery. I had a swearing-in date, a press embargo. I didn't tell a soul. I didn't need to. All I wanted was to walk into that room they'd once banished me from, not for applause, not for recognition, but to prove silently that you can erase someone from a photo, but not from history. So I flew to Boston, with one suitcase, one dress, and the certainty that this time, when I showed up, I wasn't going to blend in. I was going to interrupt the narrative. The Reed Medical 75th Anniversary Gala was less a celebration of healthcare than it was a coronation for a dynasty. Held at the Prescott Ballroom, the evening shimmered with staged nobility. Glass sculptures of DNA strands, press walls embossed with gold crests, and a 6-tier cake shaped like a hospital tower. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the orchid arrangements. Guests sipped champagne with practiced grace. It was a performance of power, one my family had choreographed for years. I arrived alone. No entourage, no flashing cameras. Just me and the sound of my heels against polished stone. I wore a navy dress, sleek, simple, with pockets deep enough to hold the past. No designer tag, no borrowed jewels. Just a pin on my lapel, barely visible unless you knew what it meant. The seal of the U.S. Department of Social Restoration. Lauren spotted me first. She was glowing in champagne satin, surrounded by hospital donors and state representatives. Her smile faltered for exactly half a second before it snapped back into place. She cut across the room with a champagne flute and the kind of grin that dripped sugar and salt in equal measure. "I hope you're not planning to speak tonight," she said through clenched teeth, still smiling for the cameras. "This isn't a forum for your pet projects." I met her gaze. "I'm not here to speak," I replied steady. "I'm here to listen." Until the truth interrupts. Before she could reply, the event coordinator called for seating. I took my place at table 8, intentionally distant from the center stage, but within full view. The symbolism was not lost on me. Mother arrived 20 minutes late, as always. Senator Margaret Reed knew how to make an entrance. She wore red, Reed red they called it, and moved like someone who assumed ownership of every space she entered. Cameras clicked. Applause rose in waves. She made her way toward me with open arms and a smile rehearsed 1,000 times. "We're so proud of how far Vivian's come," she said aloud, loud enough for the press to hear. Then, turning to Lauren, she muttered just under the music, "Keep her close, before she burns it all down." I heard every word. I smiled, not because it stung, but because it confirmed what I already knew. They didn't fear my absence anymore. They feared my return. Dinner progressed. Speeches unfolded like ceremonial scrolls, honoring surgeons, funders, legacies. Names floated by like marble engravings, not mine. When Lauren took the podium, she paused long enough to glance my way. "Our family has always believed in service," she said. "My sister too, I suppose, in whatever capacity she currently identifies as." Laughter, soft, cruel, effortless. I didn't move. Stillness, I had learned, is its own kind of weapon. Then came dessert. A white chocolate mousse with a sugared reed leaf. Clever, expensive symbolism. The servers began clearing plates just as the ballroom doors opened. A tall woman in a tailored black suit strode in, flanked by 2 aides. No announcement, no hesitation. It was Anna, my assistant. She walked straight to my table, her federal badge catching the chandelier's light. "Madam Secretary," she said, clearly and cleanly. The vice president has arrived. Your motorcade is ready at the east gate. The words landed like a fault line cracking. A reporter from the Boston Ledger stood halfway, whispering to her colleague, "Wait, that's Vivian Reed, the Secretary of Social Restoration?" The ripple effect was instant. Heads turned, napkins dropped, laughter evaporated. I stood, smoothed my dress, pushed my chair in slowly, then looked each one of them in the eye. "Thank you for the meal," I said quietly, "but I have more important work waiting." Then I walked out, not fast, not smug, just steady. Behind me, the silence collapsed into 1,000 unsaid things. But I didn't need to hear them. I'd already heard enough for a lifetime. Outside, the motorcade door opened. Anna held it for me without a word. Inside the car, she handed me a folder. Tomorrow's hearing prep. But all I could think was, this time, I didn't leave broken. I left seen. By the next morning, I was a headline. The forgotten Reed returns, wide, and she's running the country's welfare. Secretary of Social Restoration revealed as a strange daughter of political royalty. Some stories celebrated me. Others sharpened their knives. An anonymous op-ed hit the Centennial Ledger 48 hours later. Is Vivian Reed mentally fit for office? It referenced vague psychiatric history, accused me of delusions, and questioned my stability. No names, just shadows. But I knew the handwriting. Lauren's venom had always been sterile, precise. Anna showed me the next blow. A TV clip. Lauren composed, on Morning Boston Live. She tucked her hair and said, "I love my sister, but Vivian's had difficult chapters. There was self-harm. Our mother did what she could." The host leaned in. "Do you think she's fit to serve?" Lauren smiled, sweet and rehearsed. "I worry for the country." I didn't respond. I didn't scream, but I remembered. The cold fluorescent lights, the pen in my mother's hand, the 28 days when my name didn't belong to me. That night, Anna brought me a letter. "From your father," she said quietly. Inside, his handwriting wavered. "I wasn't strong enough to stop your mother, but I always believed in you. She doesn't hate you. She fears what you've proven, that her script isn't the only way to live." It didn't fix anything, but it gave shape to his silence. The next day, things shifted. Rumors surfaced. Foreign funding, backroom contracts, leaked emails I never wrote. But metadata told the truth. The messages had been crafted from IP addresses back in Massachusetts. Someone had created a shadow version of me, a fraud built to collapse my credibility. Then came the Capitol hearing. Senator Clay Whitlock leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Madam Secretary, is it true you were once institutionalized? And if so, how do you justify holding federal office overseeing 40 million Americans?" I felt the air drop. I could smell the ward, hear the nurse's nails on the clipboard. But then Anna slipped a folder into my hand. Inside, testimonies, real people, real lives. A mother of 3. I found housing because of her policies. A vet. I didn't take my life because she showed up. A girl. She told me I mattered. I cleared my throat. "Yes, I was hospitalized," I said. "Not because I was dangerous, but because I challenged a system built on control. I don't run from that. I lead with it." Then I flipped to the final page. State records, $18 million in redirected mental health funding under Senator Margaret Reed, funneled to private contractors tied to her campaign. I didn't say her name. I didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. Then a tap of a cane, a nod, and applause. Quiet, but rising. When I stepped outside, I didn't feel victorious. I felt something deeper. I had just taken back my name. And this time, no one could write over it. The Reed name didn't fall in fire. It unraveled in daylight. State audits exposed years of misused funds. Senator Margaret Reed was suspended, pending criminal investigation. Lauren vanished from public view, deleting every profile, declining every subpoena. I never celebrated. I was tired of fighting shadows. Instead, I built. With my inheritance from my father, I founded Phoenix Rising, a nonprofit devoted to girls like Alma, those trapped in broken systems with no voice. We opened our first center in a forgotten town in New Mexico, inside a shuttered school with chipped paint and big windows. No press, just purpose. On launch day, a girl approached me after my speech. Quiet, maybe 12. She said, "You didn't rescue me. You showed me I could rescue myself." I nodded. That was enough. And then, near the back of the room, I saw her. My mother. No red suit, no entourage. Just a gray coat and silence. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She nodded. Just once. Not apology, not forgiveness, but recognition. Later, Anna handed me one last letter. My father's final words. Don't ever let them call compassion weakness. It's your greatest strength. And standing in that sunlit room, surrounded by girls with stories waiting to be rewritten, I finally believed it.